Voice on now because we're recording. I hope, there we go, recording has started. Okay, let's get on with it. I'm assuming you can see my little starter screen there. So, okay, hello everybody, thank you for joining. Welcome to the May virtual event of the Welsh Azure user group. As always, we've got an action-packed session for you tonight, but just by way of introduction, meet your Welsh Azure user group team. As always, we are here. It's a community user group. We're here to service everybody that joins. I'll put a feedback link up at the end of the sessions. Your feedback is absolutely vital. You know, give us some hints and tips. What kind of content do you want to see? Do you want to speak at the event? Do you want to get involved with helping organise the events? Reach out to any one of us. There's our contact details on the screen there. So that's that. Like I say, there's two really exciting sessions. So we're just having that chat just before we kind of went live here now, but really interested. We're trying something slightly different. Normally we do hinge around the Azure focused technical sessions and flip-flop between those dev sessions and infra sessions, but we got Ben joining us first up tonight to talk around storytelling, I guess, technical storytelling. So it's really, I'm really interested to see what that, and I'm really digging the talk name as well. Freddy Kruger is not a bedtime story. Well, it was in my house during the 80s, but I'll say nothing more because I'll incriminate my parents. But yeah, no, looking forward to that session. And of course, Vanessa, huge thanks to Vanessa for joining us from across the pond over in Florida. Going to talk to us about something different, not necessarily as your focus, but architecting end-to-end data-driven solutions in 365. So two super exciting talks that I'm looking forward to getting cracking with now. Timing-wise, I'll stop rambling on shortly. Just do a few housekeeping rules and a few good announcements for tonight. You'll see a little different logo on the slides tonight if you're a regular visitor. So we'll talk about that in a second as well. But Ben will be kicking off in about 5 or 10 minutes or so. About 45 minutes, and then Vanessa should be on around about 7:30 BST. And don't forget, we've got our Welsh Azure quiz. Matt has promised that he's validated all the questions tonight. Yeah, you've validated them, Matt, haven't you?
And I've written some code to change it as well, so it should be validating itself now. Hopefully, it won't break this time.
So I'm going to get the random wheel of randomizer wheel ready just in case. But no, for those that didn't join, we got halfway through the quiz and it crashed on us the last couple of months. So that's not going to happen tonight. Anyhow, there's some gift vouchers up for grabs as well. So yeah, stick around for that after Vanessa's talk. So yeah, aiming to finish off in around about 2 hours time. So appreciate everybody who's joining us tonight as we just discussed on what is starting to appear like a bit of summer in the UK at the moment. So anyhow, housekeeping rules, they're things that we should all know and should come as common sense anyway, but please everybody do be courteous to each other. There's no stupid questions, there's no silly questions. We're all here to learn, we're all here to take part. Ask the stupid question, simple as that. Nobody will think any differently of you. So put them in the chat. Do stay on mute unless you're invited to come off mute and speak. You are in control of your own audio controls. Like I say, please do use the chat window for any questions. Be interactive. Help each other out. If you've got any other questions, drop some links in there, anything of interest. And like I say, please, if you could leave some feedback for us at the end, that would be really appreciated. Like I say, Quizzer is our quiz platform developed by Mr. Fatunka himself. I think I plug that enough every month, don't I, Matt? But built on Azure, running on Azure, and to be honest, I'm surprised he hasn't commercialized it just yet. But that'll be after Vanessa's talk, so stick around for that. Yeah, most importantly, be interactive and enjoy the sessions because that's what they're meant to be: enjoyable and interactive and fun. So, right, first bit of news for this evening. Just want to give a quick shout out to the sponsors of this user group. Servant of kind of been with us from the beginning. So, as always, huge shout out to Servant, Des and the team based up in Scotland. Thank you for being such a support to the user group over the last 3 years. And yeah, it's quite apt, really. Pretty much on our 3-year anniversary, I want to introduce and say thank you to CreditSafe. So, Ridian reached out to me a couple of months ago now. Obviously, CreditSafe, for those that don't know, I'll let Ridian say a few words in a second, but they're based probably about 20 minutes down the road from where I'm living. And it's really about, if you remember, we had Admiral support in the group beforehand, and it was great to have a locally kind of business. I don't think it's your HQ, is it, Ridian? CreditSafe in Cardiff, but it's Is it your HQ?
Yeah, it is. We've also got offices in Dublin as well.
Oh, great. Oh, I don't know if that's somebody's mic is making a really. Is that you?
Under control.
But Ryan, yeah. Do you want to say a few words about credit safe? But
Yeah,
firstly,
of course.
welcome to the Welsh Azure Use Group, Ryan and Scott.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Yeah, so thank you for, I'd like to say thank you for the opportunity to be able to sponsor the Welsh Azure User Group to start with. I mean, we've, as John said, we're based in Cardiff. A bulk of our technical staff are based in Cardiff. We do have a lot of offices, as you can see on the slide there, around the world in 14 different countries, everything from Japan throughout Europe to the US. So we've got a number of locations where we sell our products to. In fact, we sell it globally, but points of presence across the globe. And what we wanted to sponsor this for was to give something back, but also we wanted to get the CreditSafe brand better recognized out there. And I think this is a good vehicle to do this in a technical community. The other advantage, obviously, of doing that is that we could also attract some talent. We are looking for technical staff that have got Azure skills and Microsoft skills. We do make use of Azure. We also make use of another cloud as well, but Azure is used by a lot of our services. We're heavy users.
It auto bleeps, Ryan. It auto bleeps in Teams when you say that other cloud.
Other cloud. That's why I didn't say. That's why I didn't say what the other cloud was. But it's anyway. Moving on. So we're doing a lot of things with Azure at the moment. There's a lot of migration work going on from our on-premise data centers and our on-premise office locations. So Scott, who's also on this call, his team are also involved. He's one of my colleagues on the technical team there at CreditSafe, and we're doing a lot of migrations into Azure at the moment using the native tooling to enact our technical strategy that the leadership have come up with. But we use the cloud for all sorts of really good purposes. Obviously, our internal systems are run from the cloud. We're a heavy user of Dynamics. We use Azure AD as an ID provider for a lot of things, all of our applications. That's been really successful. We're a big user of Sentinel and the other security tooling. We adopted Sentinel a few years ago. So we do make use of the whole Microsoft stack pretty much. I think it's fair to say, with a particular focus on Azure, I know, for this group, but we're deploying a lot more into Azure now and migrating a lot more into Azure. So it'd be really interesting to if anybody's in this group wants to reach out and have a chat with myself, with Scott, if anyone's interested in a role or seeing what roles we've got available, then please reach out, and wants to know more, give us a shout.
No, I appreciate that, Ryan, and undoubtedly over the coming months now we can get other announcements up and whatnot, and no doubt we'll get both of you guys on at some point over the next few months, and we'll you can talk us through without giving away too much what you've been up to for the last few months, and get you on to give a talk.
Absolutely, that'd be something I'd be interested in doing, and there's a lot of good things I'm sure we can share.
I mean, it's always good when you've got that other cloud. Obviously, what it means for techies, working in that space in a multi-cloud environment. Because look, at the end of the day, it is a thing of beauty once you can get up and running and working to your kind of best practices ways. So yeah, even talking around those areas is always good things to learn. But no, look, really appreciate CreditSafe coming on board, and hopefully, like I say, over the coming months, we can start looking at getting some other interesting events and engaging events set up between us all. So
yeah, great.
Thanks guys.
Thank you.
Okie dokie. So only another quick announcement, update, whatever you want to call it. But if you haven't registered for builds, you can still register. Happening next week, 22nd to 25th. Well, from what I'm aware of, there's going to be some. Well, you can probably guess the announcements if you're anywhere close to Microsoft at the moment. But there's going to be some real cool announcements there. So if you haven't already registered, get yourself registered and start having a look through the session planners there. Because I think there's about 300 sessions or something like that over the 2 or 3 days. It's immense, far more than you could ever dream to wish for. But go and get yourselves registered. I think that's it from me. So on that note, I am going to hand you straight over to our first speaker, Mr. Ben Pearce. Once again, Ben, thank you very much for joining us, and I'm looking forward to this session. So over to you, sir.
Thank you very much. Right, let me just share my bits and pieces. Everybody see that wonderful picture of Freddy Krueger? Has that come through all okay?
Yeah, got you.
Brilliant, brilliant, brilliant. So hi everybody. It's lovely to be with you tonight. My name's Ben Pearce. Tonight, I'm going to talk to you about Freddy Krueger not being a great bedtime story. And really, what I want to talk about is how to be more relevant, more clear, and more memorable to your customers. And ultimately make you more successful. So that's basically what I'm going to be talking about tonight. Just to introduce myself, so my name is Ben Pearce. I know some of the people on the call, I was a bit of a Microsoft old timer. I worked at Microsoft for about 20 years, and I actually left only in November. And I spent the first half of my career in deep technical roles. And then the second half of my career, I led the cloud part of the cloud solution architect team. So I recognise Matt, and I don't think Anna's on the call, but I used to work closely with Anna. And so I know Microsoft very well and know Azure very well. So John, yes, you joined literally just as I left. That was the reason. That was the straw that broke the camel's back. And the other thing is, and folks may not be able to tell by my accent, I'm actually Welsh. So I was born in Cardiff. I think it was Cardiff Arms Park Hospital. My birth certificate is in Welsh, but sadly I moved away when I was about 2. So I've been raised in England, but I am Welsh. There you go. So it's lovely to be with you. Can you imagine telling the story of Freddy Krueger to some little kids? I'm going to guess John, when he was watching Freddy Krueger in the evenings at his house, I'm probably going teenager. If it was any younger, social services need to be involved. But could you imagine, if you haven't seen Nightmare on Elm Street, it's a pretty graphic, horrible horror. And can you imagine like turning over, the book, and reading Freddy's skin was puckered and knotted and gnarled, still recovering from where he'd been burnt alive, and the deadly sharp knives on each of his fingers were poised and ready to tear and slash at Nancy's flesh. He was lurking and waiting for her to fall asleep so he could execute her in her dreams. Can I imagine reading that to my 11-year-old now? Never mind a smaller child. And I wouldn't, right? And it just gives me the creeps even reading it out loud. And I'm sure you wouldn't really either. And why? Well, because it's inappropriate for the audience. It's going to lead to a negative response. It's great for a bunch of adults that love horror, but it's not great for small kids. So let's start to think about that in the tech world. So often we might tell inappropriate stories in the tech world. Not inappropriate as in HR violation, I hope inappropriate, but inappropriate as in they're the wrong story for the audience that are in front of you. And therefore, they are not as impactful and they don't help drive the change and drive the influence that you want to. And so that's what I'm talking about today, how you do that. So why are we going to be talking about technical storytelling? Well, it will help you be more influential. And what I mean by that is not that you get free ice creams because of your pumping Instagram account, but that people listen to you, that people have confidence in your position and in your advice, and that people are prepared to act on the things that you've said. And certainly leading a lot of the Azure teams over the years at Microsoft, there were people that were listened to regardless of the accuracy of their technical content. The technical foundation needed to be great, but there was people that would be listened to and could influence senior stakeholders at customers more effectively. And so I want to help you with some of the things that they would do. So to help you be more influential. I think technical storytelling helps you be more memorable. So I'm not saying that you need to turn up to your architecture meetings, stick a toothpick through your tongue and balance an olive on top. But it's about people remembering you and remembering your message, about people not instantly forgetting the things that you've said, about people taking your message to heart and wanting to do something about it. And I think if you get those two right, then it leads to you being successful, right? It leads to you driving some action. So whether that's people choosing your design and your company, whether that's people investing time in learning the tech that you're passionate about, whether it's building a community in your area, whatever it is that you want to talk about, it'll help you in those ways. So that's what I'm going to talk about for the next few minutes. And there's only really two key frameworks that I want you to just take away from this evening. The first one is a framework called Oren, and I'm going to go through this in a bit of detail for you tonight. And then the second one is the split brain problem. So that's what I'm going to talk about tonight. I want you to be able to influence your customers, your stakeholders, your peers, your boss, whoever it is, more effectively. And I think these two techniques you can take away tonight and will really help you. So let me introduce Oren. So Oren, bit of a weirdly spelt word, if I'm honest. Maybe you need to think of some elven king, like from Lord of the Rings or something, like the Lord Oren or something like that. But it's a little mnemonic that whenever you're going to start talking to somebody on either a technical subject or a business outcome subject, whatever it might be, it's a great thing to remember and be able to use. And what it stands for is audience, objective, remembered, emotion, and next steps. And so what I want to just do for a few minutes is just to step through what I mean by each of these. And every time I do a presentation, this is what I write down. This is the first thing that I write down, is what are the points for each of these letters in the talk that I'm going to give. So let's start with audience. Okay, so audience. Whenever you're giving a presentation, or like I'm giving a presentation tonight, the audience is the most important thing. Often presenters think that I'm the most, I'm presenting, I'm the most important thing, but I'm not. The audience is always the most important thing. You guys all on the call today, and you are the center. You are investing your non-refundable time in listening to me, and therefore it's so important that I'm going to give you the focus, and I'm going to try and give you as much value as I possibly can. And to do that, I need to know the audience, right? I need to understand who's in the audience. Have I got a team? If I got a marketing director, have I got a group of graduates? Have I got a team of architects? Who's going to be in your audience? Because if you know who's going to be in your audience, then this is the crucial bit. You can then be relevant to your audience. So if you're talking to a business decision maker, the things you say are going to be different to if you're talking to a bunch of engineers. And so understanding that is absolutely key, because then you can give them something of value. And so the first thing that you're going to do whenever you start to think about giving a presentation, and my camera's just gone all out of focus. Come back to me, camera. I'm like some weird magician now, waving my magic fingers to try and get me back in focus. Don't know what's happened there. I'm sure it'll come back in a minute. Like I've got to do some weird little dance now to get it back in focus. What's happened? I think it's telling me I've got a face for radio. I'm going to carry on as it continues to blur itself out, and then hopefully it will come back in a second. So audience, absolutely key. So whenever I'm going to give a presentation, first thing I write down is who's going to be my audience, so that I can think about my messaging and think about how I can make my message relevant to them. Okay. Next thing, objective. And I'm just going to turn my camera off and on because it's still not coming back. Hold on a second. Let's turn that off and on. No, right. We literally are going to just go with the blurred. We're going to go with the blurred camera. Right. So we've got our audience. We know who's going to be in our audience. Next thing to think about is objective. So what is the objective of the session? And do you know what? Again, it's not all about you as the presenter. There's two parts to this. There's the audience and then there's the person delivering. So the audience have got a set of objectives. So if we think about it in this scenario we're in right now, why have you turned up? So you've turned up to hopefully find something that's going to be of value to you, that you can use when you get back to work, that you can use in a variety of scenarios. So there's an objective of why you've turned up. And that's probably different to why my objective of being here. You know, my objective for being here is, you know, I love talking to people about this topic. I love helping people out. And also, I've started a new business somewhat recently, and I need to get my brand out there a little bit as well. You know, so there's a sub-objective for me as well. And so it's important to understand that there's objectives for why the audience are going to turn up to listen to you and why you want to be there. And you need clarity on there as you decide what you're going to say. So those are the first two things. Third thing is, what do you want your folks to remember? Quite often, and I've observed this so many times with the tech teams at Microsoft, so often there is, right, I am going to get everything I can out of my brain into your brain. And the problem is that's just not how life works. And so actually, to be really effective, you need to simplify the message a little bit and figure out what are the key things that you want them to remember. And so you need to think as you go into a session, what do you want the audience to remember from your session? So what is the very key message, the key thing that you want them to take away? And then what are the sub themes, the supportive key messages that add a bit more substance? Ideally 3, but no more than 5 that you want them to take away. So if you've got real clarity on that, then that means you can design everything you say so that that audience take that away with them. You know, so if I think of that for, you know, tonight, you know, my key message that I'd love you to take away is that if you are relevant, if you are clear in your message, if you are memorable, if you can do all of that, then you will be more successful. And I've got 2 things, Auron and the split brain, which will come up later, that will both help you achieve that. So that's what I want you to take away. So if you're on Twitter now or Instagram or playing Fortnite or whatever it is in the background, if I can design everything so that those are the key things that you take away, then I've done my job. So all the rest is just then bonus if you remember anything else. So we've had audience, who's in the audience, what's your objective, what are the key points that you want them to remember. This next one may be a bit different, and people don't think about this necessarily in the tech world so often, but how do you want people to feel when you talk to them? What emotion do you want them to have? And there is a brilliant quote. I love this quote. It's from Maya Angelou, and it says, people will forget what you said, people will forget what you did, but people will never forget how you made them feel. How often do we think about that when we're maybe talking about an Azure architectural diagram, or we are trying to get a customer to buy off on our design as being the best design? Do you make them do you want them to feel overwhelmed, bored, bewildered? You know, these are the sorts of things that you're going for? Or do you want to make them feel confident? Do you make them want to feel inspired? Do you want to make them feel surprised at perhaps how easy the road ahead might be? You know, what are the things that you want to make them feel? And how are you going to put that in your talk? Not something that people often deliberately think about. And then the final thing is next steps. So next steps is what is going to happen after this presentation has finished, because normally a presentation is just part of the journey of where you're going. It's not the end in itself. And certainly at Microsoft, there was always a massive culture of, oh, can you send me the slides after you've done that? And, honestly, what an awful strategy, right? That the only way that we're going to move forward, what is going to happen next, is by me sending you a 30 or 40 megabyte file with some pictures and some badly formatted notes in the presenter notes section. So it's really thinking about what actually do you want to happen next. So to be very intentional on what you want your audience to do next. So, maybe that could be you follow up with, right, this topic that is really important to me. I'm going to make sure that after I've delivered this, there's a blog article online, which is going to contain some of the details. I'm going to point people to a hands-on lab, because I appreciate a lot of people learn by doing rather than listening. I'm going to point them to this community where they can go and ask questions. I'm going to send them links to these ebooks, and what is your strategy for what's going to happen next? And don't leave it to be an afterthought. That is, I'll send you my slides. Think about it a little bit more strategically. So if I give you a little heads up, a little taster of what I'm going to share with you at the end of this, which would normally be in my next steps at the end. So I'm going to point you to my podcast, which is a place for you to go and listen to some really good episodes. In fact, the next episode comes out next week, and I've got Jeffrey Snover on, who is the inventor of PowerShell. So any of you that have cursed him during your certifications or loved him when PowerShell has saved you a million hours of repetitive work, Jeffrey Snover is going to be on the podcast, and that's next week that gets posted. So I'm going to point you there. I'm going to point you to my website, and I've got a QR code. So if you want to screen snip and take that QR code with your camera, you can get there really easily. I'm going to take you to LinkedIn. If you want to get in touch with me on LinkedIn, that's how you can connect with me. So I've tried to put a little bit of thought into what I want to happen after this session, so that I can continue to build my business ultimately. And so take that and apply that to what you might be doing in your world, and what's the follow up to the presentations that you want to give. So, Oren, if you can take that away, put that in the back of your mind, and use it again and again, I would heartily recommend it. I use it all the time, and it really helps me build things that land with people. Now, at this juncture, I'm going to pause for a second. I'm going to throw it open to any questions. I've just seen something that's come in the chat as well. I don't know if that's a question. How many unused pictures of yourself did you end up with, and what poses did you try then? Right, this is brilliant. And just while I'm doing that, I'm just going to try and do something with my camera. So let me just turn my camera off a second. See if I can get something going on. Basically, there's some dodgy photos of me on LinkedIn in some somewhat weird poses. There we go. That's a bit better. Let's go and blur it again. And basically, I get my wife to take pictures of me in slightly weird poses with weird equipment to illustrate the points that I'm making. So it's probably worth going to check me out on LinkedIn just for that weird, slightly set of photos, really. So let me pause at that juncture. Any questions on this Oren framework about putting the audience at the center, about focusing on what our objective are, about what we want people to remember, how we want to make them feel, and the next steps? Any questions want to come up on maybe practically how you might do that in different scenarios with maybe customers or bosses or anything like that? see someone chatting. Is that you, John, chatting? Feel free to come off mute if you've got any questions. How do you handle an audience that is a little hostile for some reason? Oh, great question. So the question, I think, is so how do you handle, why are they hostile? And feel free to whack your camera on, John, if you want, and come off mute, and we can have a bit of a conversation about it. And Darren as well, and Matt, if you've got some as well. Let's make it a bit more engaging and a bit more interactive. John, have you got a scenario that you're thinking of? Has this come up?
Yeah, no, absolutely. No, by the way, Ben, no, great so far. I'm following along. I'm making copious notes now, but I think...
Yeah, is this some feedback to me?
So it's all right. No, I think you using this methodology, like the emotion bit, I think I've certainly been in meetings, maybe they're not hostile towards me as an individual, but certainly hostile towards your company for maybe it's you're costing them too much, or maybe something has gone wrong and support hasn't acted quick enough. So they kind of direct their frustration at you because you are a representative. Yeah. Kind of that emotion thing then kind of gets lost a little bit, maybe. I don't know. I mean, have you come across that? I mean, any kind of hints and tips of what you would do in those kind of scenarios?
Yeah, and honestly, I've had it so many times.
I always try the comedy approach until I see their face doesn't move at all, and then I get a bit serious and go, okay, I can see you're angry.
Yeah. I think the first thing is it's about listening, and it's about asking questions, and it's about trying to build some empathy and understand why are we in this situation. And often there's a really valid reason, like a product's let them down. I almost went back into like I was at Microsoft, like we've turned around on a feature or something like that. Often there's a very valid reason. And so I think often it's good just to let them vent a little bit and have a little pop, and then it's just like water off a duck's back. Inside I'm seething, but it's a little bit of a poker face and a little bit of okay, let's let them vent, and then now when you start to get to the point where they start to becoming a little bit disruptive, that's when it starts to become a little bit of a problem, and then I would always just try and be really nice and calm, and that might be where you shut down questions and say, thanks so much. I'd just love to get through this bit. Do you mind if we take that offline? Because I really hear what you're saying, and I'd love to talk about that in depth. But I also just want to talk about some other things. So can I come back to you? So I would always try and keep calm, listen, have some empathy, and if they start to become disruptive, then try and shut them down in a really nice, positive way, because you can rest assured probably most of the audience are thinking, oh, they're being a bit of an idiot. So they're probably on your side as well. And then if it gets really disruptive, well, that's very rare that happens.
No. Cheers, Ben. But no, Darren, and I like Steve's question there as well.
Yeah, Darren, what if your audience is a mix of business, techie, etc.? Great question, Darren. So what I would generally recommend is you do some research before you start with who's going to be in the audience, if you can. And if you can, and you can then get some personas. Hey, this is to senior management. This is to deep techies. Then if you go, it's going to be a mix. There's two approaches, and that there's two approaches you can take. The first one is you go a bit generic, right? You go sort of lowest common denominator, and that maybe makes it a little bit higher. It means that everybody can understand the entire presentation. The problem with that is your techies, for example, if you've gone really high level, might be a bit bored, and it might not be so relevant. So that might be where I might go, actually, I'm going to start off with some high relevant stuff. And now I'm going to say very clearly, and I'm going to flag this is now some high level stuff that brings everybody to a certain, brings us to a certain position. And now for the next 10 minutes, I just want to talk about this in a little bit more depth. Be really clear, flag that this is the techie bit. If you can take people on there, funnel them down into the tech, brilliant. But if you can't, just call it out and say there's going to be a techie bit, there's going to be a high level bit, and hopefully, but it will finish after 10 minutes, so that then people have kind of got clarity on what's going to happen, and you've given something of value to everybody in the audience. So that might be an approach that I'd go for for the mix of business and techie. How do you handle a mute audience? Well, I find if you blur out your camera and just make it as awkward as possible, that has a great effect. But on a more serious note, it's just keep persevering, really. That, you know, and try and make stuff as engaging as possible, and then just keep entertaining. Keep persevering. There's lots of reasons why people might not want to come off a camera or ask a question, and that's all okay. So don't take it personally. Keep trying to engage people. Keep persevering, and then just hope. Matt, what have I got from Matt? Matt, I only came in at the end of R. I only came in at the end of R. I don't know what that means. Do you have a slide deck I could go over? No, but I will point you to a LinkedIn article that has all of this information in it at the end. Is it a good approach to plan talks, presentations around those key messages or sub-themes? Absolutely. I used to do lots of the big Microsoft events, the big ones in Seattle, Florida. I've been to Orlando at the conference center, Barcelona. I used to fly all over the world on some of the really big stages. And I would always go, right, what's the key thing? And I used to teach PowerShell. That was what I used to do. So it was a pretty deep, pretty dry subject of command line interfaces. And I would go with, what's this key thing that I want them to know? And then I'd break it into 3 key things. And then I'd spend about 15 minutes talking about that. And I'd go into detail on that thing. Then I'd take the second one and then the third one. And so you can apply that to really deep topics. And it takes you away from the feature walkthrough, you know, like, this is the box that you tick if you've got more than 10,000 users. And this is you kind of say, right, I'm going to talk about security and how we deal with it. And then I'd pick a couple of the key security themes and we'd maybe dive into that a little bit. So yeah, definitely I would talk about those key themes. PowerShell isn't a dry topic. You're absolutely right, Alan. Love a bit of PowerShell. Love it, Han. So, Warren, great thing to take away. I use it all the time. The next thing I want to talk about is split brain. And I used to talk about this with my teams at Microsoft all the time. The split brain problem. So the split brain problem, hold on a second. Right, the split brain problem is basically where you use your visual aids to distract from the message that you're saying. And you don't intend to, but it's just what happens. And so people are distracted by whatever it is that you've got on the screen, so that you could be giving them the elixir of life. You could be solving world peace, but they're distracted by the thing that you've just put on the slide, and they're now only half listening. And we do this all the time. And the 2 big culprits that I typically see for that are lots of text on slides and really complex architectural diagrams that are just dumped on people. So let me give you a couple of examples and how the approach that I would take to change it. So split brain problem, we're diverting people's attention in 2 different ways and reducing the impact of what we're saying. So let me pop this one up. Wordy slides. Sorry, let me pop up this wordy slide. Right, I'm going to pause and I'm just going to let you read that a second because this is exactly the issue that I'm talking about. I'm just going to let you read that because there's some quite interesting things there and people are going, oh, what's that? What's that? What's that? So I'll just let you read it a second. But what I've done is I've created a slide. It's quite interesting, maybe, depending on your perspective. It's very wordy. But I have used presentations, slide designer AI to make it look nice. And therefore, because I've made it look nice, we'll go, that's all right. It doesn't matter about the amount of text that I've got on the slide. But the problem is, as soon as I put that up, people start reading it. And it might be that I wanted, you know, bullet point 2 there was cyber criminals can penetrate 93% of company networks. That might be what I wanted to focus on, and that was my key point. But somebody's read down to that bottom point already. You know, data breaches caused by negligence may lead to jail time. And now they've got off on a spiral of their own thought, thinking about jail. And I could be giving them the most interesting information about cyber criminals and company networks, and they're already gone down and they're thinking about something else. So I've reduced the impact of both the text and what I'm saying by putting them on the screen at the same time. So if perhaps an approach that I would, if I was going to put up and talk about these sorts of things with customers, I'd maybe go for a slide something more like this. Okay. And what I'd do is I would copy all of those things that I had in my notes, on the slide, and they'd go in my notes, because that's what I want to talk about. I want to talk about that cyber criminals can penetrate 93% of company networks. And I do want to take people on a journey to get to jail time, you know, and that's maybe where I want to finish talking about this, about the challenges we have in cybersecurity. But I'm not going to pop it all up there to begin with. And so to do something like this, I mean, this is just an Unsplash image that you can get for free. So this is just a free image off of Unsplash. I've just taken one bullet point and put it in a slightly transparent box. And suddenly it conjures an awesome image. You know, you can almost just imagine there's a hacker, the whole city, the whole world's at his feet. He can get to whatever he wants to. And it conjures that up and reinforces the point. And then I can take people on the journey to getting to perhaps talking about jail time for execs due to negligence. But if I was to go back to that slide, this is going to be a lot less impactful than if I was to do something like this. And you don't need to be a real great designer to do that. You just need to find a nice picture and put a bullet point in it, in something like that. So let me pause there, because wordy slides is something that we see a lot in our industry, and I'll fire it out to everybody else. Anybody got any questions or comments or disagree? You know, please disagree if you feel on this.
Me again, Ben.
Go for it.
So I love the way that you're doing this, by the way, kind of taking it really simplistically and putting a point on a slide. One of the big problems I've always faced with presenting and speaking and remembering what my slides are, and I bet you're going to say it comes down to practicing your presentation, but it's always that I always rush ahead and say stuff and forget to change a slide. Okay. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Have you got any strategy, like, apart from, I guess it's just practice your deck and know your deck, right? But
yeah,
have you got anything else that you do to kind of help? Do you know what I mean? That's one big problem I've always faced with. I've got this deck, and yet genuinely they are wordy decks. You know, I agree with you. They're always lots of words, lots of distractions. So, but yeah, that point of keeping on point for your slides.
Yeah. And you, I mean, the first thing you said is the answer is practice. Now I did one of my podcasts, and I did it with a comedian, actually. I did it a couple of weeks ago, and we were talking about how you prepare, like, for a comedy routine, a stand-up routine. And you know, her advice was, if you've got, let's say, 3 hours to prep, okay, she would do an hour writing, brainstorming, writing, an hour editing, which is cutting that down into the key message, that kind of stuff, and an hour practicing. So that's how she would split it into 3. Now, if you take that to our world, right, we've got things like demos to think about. We've got things like slides to think about. We've got architectural diagrams to think about. We're not just telling jokes. But this rule of 3, you know, splitting it into thirds and going, right, what am I going to write? You know, I need to write my demos, write my whatever. Now I need to edit them and make them, and now I need to practice them. And certainly the culture that I, experienced was, if we're preparing for a presentation, that means I spent half an hour on the slides and then just delivered it. And I would change that completely and go, no. You need time practicing. You need to, if you've got time to prep, you break that up and spend more time practicing it. And the other thing I'd say is take stuff on the road. We sometimes think I need to write a unique presentation for every, but actually, if you're, there's only so many ways you can talk about Sentinel. So invest in doing that really well and practicing it and getting some PowerPoint, some notes in there that help, when you come back 2 weeks later and you've got to do it again. So you've got some notes in there that remind you of the key points, quick practice, and you're ready to go again. So invest in really good quality stuff that you reuse and practice it would probably be my top tip.
Cool. Cheers, Ben. Yeah, I think when I've done them before, I tend to put a lot of notes in the notes section.
Yeah.
And then I tend to trip myself up by reading a note and then forgetting where I was or one, do you know what I mean? And but it is that practice bit that I seem to miss out a lot of,
You're right. And maybe you have in your PowerPoint notes, you've got a couple of bullets, which is right. This is, the things that I can just very quickly look at that will keep me on point, and I can just quickly glance down at them and know what I've got to say. And then at the bottom of that, you've perhaps got your exhaustive stuff, so that when you're practicing and trying to, you're on the train on the way to a customer. Oh, I just need to read through all of this stuff and I know it's all there. But at the top, you've just got a few bullets so that now when you're in front of people, you can just use those bullets really quickly to get to the point.
Yeah,
Great.
Cheers, Ben.
Yeah, great question, John. Right, strongly agree. Thanks, Han, for your comments. You teach programming, love it, and you spare time love it even more. Word slides with animated GIFs. Right, okay, a rare combo, love it, and struggle to follow it, and I was all teaching it. Right, next question though from Han. How do you approach this with diagrams? Right, let's do that. So let's move into diagrams. So what I've done for this example is I've just lifted a diagram. This might be a month or two old, so if it's out of date now, don't hold me to account on it. But I just lifted it off of the Azure architecture reference site. Now, the challenge that you often might see is, right, you've started off and you've done this lovely, you've got a lovely picture, you've started off at the high level, but now we need to explain something really complex. And so people might go from a slide like this and then suddenly dump a really deep architectural diagram on people. It's like falling off a cliff. You just go off and you're off. So this is the diagram I've taken. So I think this is what is this for? The modern data warehouse. So this is the modern data warehouse Azure reference architecture. As of a couple of months ago, I think I took this slide. And probably there's already people reading this. I'm sure some of you now are going, oh, what's that he's got in there? Oh, what's that? Oh, data, Azure data lake. Oh, Gen 2, right. Okay. There's people that will start looking at that. And already I've got the split brain going on. People will be looking at that. And it is hugely overwhelming. So if I was going to try and go from a slide that was perhaps like this, a nice, really nice visual slide, what I might do is something like this, because I look at this diagram and then break it apart into chunks. And so I'd start off with perhaps something like this. So go, right, modern data warehouse for small, medium business. So let me talk you through how we're going to do this. Well, the first thing is we're going to have data coming in, and it's going to be coming in from all different places. It's going to be streamed in via IoT. We've got unstructured data. We've probably got some structured data. It's all coming in, and we've got to capture all that data as it comes in. And then we've got to load it in. We've got to take it in and process that and bring it onto our cloud platform, bring it into our solution. So we've got to load and we've got to ingest that data. And once we've loaded it and ingested it, we've got to store it somewhere, store it in a way that we can access it. Now, once we've got it stored, we now need to process that data. We need to make it the right shape. We need to start thinking about perhaps how, the best way to store it, the best technologies that we can use so that we can access the data in the way that we need to access it. And at that point, that's when we can bring in our data scientists to start thinking about machine learning. We can start thinking about how we want people to consume it. And then after we've done that, finally, we need to serve that up to our end users so that they can, consume the data. So I've sort of put this middle layer in. And now, without redoing the slide, all I've done is use a white box to cover up the bits, and I've used the morph effect to then move the white box along. So I can then say, right, so we need to talk about where the data's coming from. Perhaps it's from Dynamics, perhaps it's from IoT, whatever. Then we move into the load and ingest. So now you can see we need to ingest that, and that's either with pipelines or we're using event hubs. Okay, and now we need to store that data, SQL database. This is when you'd use that. Azure Data Lake Gen 2, that's when you'd use that. So we've got the data stored. Now we want to think about how we process it. And so that's using Stream Analytic Jobs, SQL Serverless. Okay, now we want to collaborate together, get the data scientists involved using Azure ML, Synapse. And then finally, we want to get that out to our users using Power BI, Power Apps, whatever it is. So the point is that I haven't hit that with them and overwhelmed them, split the brain, and meant that I can't have a good conversation about event hubs because other people are thinking about Azure machine learning already. So again, takes about 2 seconds to just think, right, well, can I break this architectural diagram into some real high level chunks? And then if I can't be bothered to get the Azure icon pack, and redo it, can I lift it off of Microsoft and then just use a white box or different shapes so that it reveals in the appropriate fashion so that I can walk people through it? If I pause there, any questions on that for the diagrams piece? Okay. So that was the content that I wanted to cover. So we started off thinking about, we want to be relevant to our audience, right? If we can be relevant to them, then we can give them something that is valuable to them, and we can tailor our message, whether it be to business decision makers, technical decision makers, engineers, graduates, enterprise architects, whatever it is. And if we know we've got a mixed group, we can think about how we change our message so that we can cover those different groups. So if we can be relevant, half the job is done. So understanding our audience is really important. And then we've thought about it helps you be influential, that people will listen to you and actually take what you say. I mean, I know I keep plugging my podcast, but the very first podcast episode I did was with a CEO, and it was about his experience talking to technical people. And he was saying how there would be certain technical people he would talk to that would overwhelm him, and he therefore didn't have confidence in them. And there were others that would talk to him at the right level, and he had loads of confidence in them, regardless of the validity of the technical argument. But he could listen to the people, he would listen to and be influenced by the people that spoke at his level. It's an interesting listen. And then you want people to remember what you've said. You don't want to leave the room and they forget about you, your product, your design instantly. And if you get those two things right, then ultimately it leads to action, which is what this is all about. You want people to do stuff, be a better programmer, buy your product, do whatever it is, and it really helps you with that. And so we thought about 2 techniques. Oren, and as I said, I use this every time. Whenever I've been asked to do a presentation, I write this down and I use that as my guiding light for the rest of the presentation. And when I'm thinking about visual aids, I'm mindful and cognizant of the split brain problem and how I can keep people on the narrative with me as I take them through the things that I want them to remember. So next steps. If you want to listen to my podcast, it's available Spotify, Google, Apple. So please do. If you want to have a look at my website, my Elevated You website, then please do go there. And if you want to connect with me on LinkedIn, please do. I love connecting with people, because not only do I get to share the stuff that I want to share, but I get to listen to everybody and find out other people's opinions and see what's going on in the world. So if you want to connect, that would be absolutely lovely. And as part of my company, what I actually spend a lot of time doing is going around to technical companies, working with them on how they develop these skills. So actually, what I've talked to you about tonight are 2 of the lessons from my technical storytelling course. It's a video on demand course. There's about 100 lessons, and I've been through about 2 of them with you, 2 or 3 of them that I've been with you tonight. So this is the technical storytelling professional program. So if this is the sort of thing that you think could help you or help your organization, what I've been spending my time during the day doing is a 10-week program where we sit down and go through how to become a better technical storyteller. And we do that with video on demand and practical exercises, and then like a Teams call every week to go through stuff. And then get together for a 2-day workshop where we get cameras, teleprompters, lights, and we can practice either being in boardrooms, on stages, digital storytelling, all of that kind of stuff. And then with some people, I've done some one-to-one coaching. So if people have got a really big conference, perhaps like a build event, you know, I haven't helped anybody for this build event, but those sorts of events where people have suddenly got a huge audience, it's got to be really high production value. How do we get a really good message out there? And I help do coaching for that kind of stuff. And in fact, I wanted to do a little giveaway. So the technical storytelling course is available for anybody just to get. You don't need to be with an organization, and I'd like to give away 2 for free. So they're worth about a price. They're 347 quid if you were to go and buy them on the internet. And I'd love to give away 2 for free. So if you post a comment on tonight's session, pop it on LinkedIn, and if you tag me in it and use the WAGD, so Welsh Azure User Group Technical Storytelling, on 22nd, which I think is Monday, I've got a note in my diary to go and randomly, and I shall use a PowerShell script to randomly select 2 of the names and give you access, a year's access to the course, which is worth 350 quid. So if you know, please do. I'd love to give that away and get more people getting on the course. So that's it, really. That's everything I wanted to say. Remember, Freddy Kruger is not a great bedtime story unless you're in the Lunn household, and then it's perfectly fine.
No, it sure is. Ben, that was fantastic. Matey, that was absolutely brilliant. Thank you so much for that. Yeah, I don't think I got any other questions at the minute, but I'm sure I will have after. So I think I'll be hitting you up, no doubt, and I'm going to be commenting on my own post to try and win one of those. No. I think it's really great, and you're right. I think so many of these skills are kind of so often overlooked. You know, for a lot of us, you know, we're maybe we're not all out there giving presentations to boardroom execs, C-suite execs on a daily basis, but we're certainly there presenting to our colleagues or to our peers or to our management. So these skills are invaluable. So
yeah, and the other place I'd say they're really invaluable, hiring. So I was a hiring manager at Microsoft for about 11 years. I can't tell you how many people I interviewed, and these are the sorts of things we're looking for, you know. And so part of the interview process getting into Microsoft is, as I'm sure you know, John, you joined in November, is giving a presentation. And so it comes up in all forms, whether it's getting a new job, getting somebody to buy a product, getting your boss to accept your idea and architecture and use it. You can use it all over the place, these sorts of things.
No, absolutely. But look, I'm sure everybody's given their thanks on chat. But virtual claps or come off mute and give Ben a round of applause. And you know, good luck with the business as well, Ben. I mean, I'll certainly be throwing this around for a few weeks to come yet. But we'll get a few people on this as well. But thank you again, Ben. And look, do stick around.
I will.
For the quiz. Do take part in that later. But yeah. Lovely to meet you, Ben, and thank you again. And we'll catch up.
That's all right. I shall stick around.
Yeah, we'll catch up
and
later.
I shall stop sharing.
But no, right, okay. Well, we will move swiftly on. Thank you to Ben for. I hope everybody will agree. An awesome talk there, and I've written down quite a lot of notes now, so I'm going to be looking into those. But I'll test my newfound colleagues in Microsoft, see if I've got any better over the coming weeks. But look, hand you straight over to Vanessa. How you doing, Vanessa? Thanks for joining us.
I'm doing well. I hope you can hear me. Can you hear me?
Loud and clear. Got you.
Oh, awesome. Great. All right. Thank you, Ben. That was great. I love stuff like that, by the way. I think it's great. It's like all the other skills outside of the things that you actually do. And so let me share my screen. Just introduce myself. I'm going to move my stuff down here real quick. There we go. So my name is Vanessa Toves. I am by trade a Microsoft 365 solutions architect. And what that means is I dedicated my career to Microsoft, right? And never having worked for Microsoft. So the very first versions of SharePoint on-prem and their BI suite, taking that all the way up into 365, which once I kind of realized that that was, pretty stable in terms of like what it was offering, I pretty much jumped and never really looked back. So I love to present and share knowledge, share things I've learned, especially in the space of like what I used to do on a daily basis, build intranets, knowledge bases, replace manual solutions. And I love the platform. I think it has changed not just the world of technology, but it has normalized solutions for from a large company to a small one. Before, some companies couldn't even afford a SharePoint server farm or the licensing with the hardware, the licensing. But now, like my sister's hard cidery company, I took them to 365 many years ago. And here was this small little company. Originally 30 people, went up to 50. And they had the same powerful tools as, some of my large insurance or financial institutions. So we're going to talk about what an end-to-end solution looks like. And I know this is the Azure, right, user group, but the reality is from an administrative perspective, I think it's also just as important to understand what do these tools do? What are people doing with them in your tenant? And also, how can you use them yourselves to, not even just necessarily manage processes or anything like that in Azure, but some of the things that you're looking at outside of it, right? The businesses. So, right, you put your BA hat on. You have to add and have some questions, right? In terms of this is what are you solving? I went to work. Oh, look, I left the logo for when I presented this last. I went to work for a Druva data protection company as a subject matter expert on 365. I work for a company that doesn't use 365. They're a Google shop. It's very painful for me, but I am chipping away at that, and eventually we're going to go to 365, right? Microsoft. And no one, no one says that we don't have an intranet. We don't have, we're having an issue with this. Like, no one's asking me to solve those business problems, because if no one is asking you, sometimes the solutions you provide you think are good. One, you might miss the mark, and you're going to have possibly poor adoption. So know what problems you're solving, and if the problem stems from with what you're doing, that's fine. Your own role, and you want to build this solution, absolutely. But it's going to be hard to say, oh, marketing has this problem or HR has this problem, and I'm going to go create a solution in silo, right? And who knows if they're going to like what you have to say. But are we replacing something that's manual, something that's existing? Right? There's a bunch of questions that you want to ask before you get into even touch a technology, touch a form or a flow or any of that. One of the biggest things too is who will this solution be interacting with? It's extremely important to understand, and we'll also talk about that towards the end of this. So I only have a few slides, and then we're going to go straight into more in the demo. The end user who's going to use it. Maybe not everyone in the company is going to have access to click and do the things that you need. People that might have to manage it or do approvals, right? The executives, because each one of these audiences requires different attention. They might require different things from your solution, right? So understand who it's going to be affecting. Right? What's the flow? If it's an existing process, I don't ever build any solution without having documented a flow. I like swim lanes. They work great, especially when you have multiple audiences that are there. And what is good about that is I put these flows, I listen, I might document, I might even design while I'm doing these requirements. And so that these users are involved in the process. And I do not build the Power Automate flow unless I've got consensus, approval. And I might have multiple flows in here. And each one of these things has to be something that the business owner, the one that is saying, this is our problem that you're going to solve, they're involved with this, right? What does it, am I going to fire an email at this point in time, at this point in time? Because the documentation, this part, right, the diagramming, it puts it in front of them. It turns something that is in an email or a series of emails over 6 months that they oftentimes step away from. They don't understand what that true flow is until they see it. Right. So it also helps to open up questions about this flow. You challenge it. Do you want to do this? What happens here if this, right? If yes, if no. So design. In automation, in any kind of automation, there might be 6 steps. What you also find is you have to challenge whether everything needs to be automated. Right? I've done this a number of times, especially with HR. HR wants to go in and reach into an ADP system, go do certain things, and then come back. Well, yes, we can do that. We can automate. We can reach into other systems and design these full-blown whatever, but it might actually have a cost implication to do it. So maybe not every step needs to be automated. Maybe every step needs to be communicated, but the actual step of going and reading some value somewhere in some third-party system, who knows, right? So you look for these steps, all the different steps in a process, and understand how that affects both what you have to develop, also the cost and management of time, right? Because you have to realize that what you're creating, this is a long-term solution. It is you're making the organization commit to these technologies, to these licenses, to whatever it is that you're doing, whether you're there or not, right? My favorite thing, having come out of the BI space as well, is that you need to know about your data, right? What you're going to collect, where. If you're replacing something that's already manual and they have examples, you want to create a repository, look and understand the data, understand, what is it about a particular thing, a contract. Okay. Now, does that mean you're going to use every piece of metadata? Who knows? Some you might use in email notifications, in your post back into a team. Some you might use in reporting. Understand what that schema is before you go and build things, because what's painful is that you get all the way through a solution and you realize you could have entered this particular value somewhere. You could automate it and brought it in from, the Graph API, using the Graph API to get the user's data. And so then it causes you to redesign, re-architect. So when you're looking at solutions, you look at what you have to collect, then you also step back and you challenge these customers, right? These customers, internal customers, about what they have to report, the frequency, the communication, right? So know what those types of things are. And the other part, know where you're going to get them from, right? I start off a process, and oftentimes people don't really believe that you can start off with 6 or 2, 4, 6, 8 values that starts a form, and you end up with 50. How do you do that? Where does it come from? Where do you where do you get this data from, right? So that's also important because it also helps you know what you're going to develop and where you're going to introduce data, right, into the process. I think just 2 more slides, maybe. I think 1 or 2 more slides. In the world of 365, you have a lot of apps, right? You have to know what app is going to be involved in your solution. in whatever way, exchange, online, email, for communication, Teams, for communication, maybe for storing data, all right, Visio, SharePoint, Power BI. Understand that, because the other thing that you have to do is understand, what do you have available? What does your license entail? Now, there's nothing worse than a solution being designed by a developer, and they go off, they got their requirements, they go off for however long, they come back and show this amazing solution, and you're like, wow, you just hooked your solution for a company of 5,000 to an E5 license. We have E3, right? That's a big, huge expense. Understand what is available. Sometimes you can help bridge a license gap by showing value and showing savings in your solution. But that's going to be a hard thing for you to do if you wrap your solution and say, this is great, but everyone in the company needs a Power BI Pro license. And they're like, oh, that's a lot of dollars a month. I can, we just had a layoff. Why don't we use what we have? You can be creative, but know what apps are going to be involved. What do you have license for? 2 more slides and then off to our demo. Remember this slide at the beginning, the audience? Well, what we have to do, and it's what most people hate, is do documentation. You have to document, and you think of documentation in different ways. Video, your intranet, PDFs, whatever, Word documents. And each audience might require something different. For end users that are going to interact, you might publish something on an intranet site, a page accessible to everyone. Short 2-minute videos. Click here. This is what's going to happen. Click here. Done. Communicate. For the other people that are involved in this, especially when you're dealing with approvals or dealing with any additional steps where they have to come back into your solution to, right? You need to document that. Overview the video, overview in sections. This is the section, this section, this section. Short videos. Now, I tell people to think about this. If you could leave and have your solution run without one email from you, one text, one anything, right? And all the parties that are involved, if you can go on vacation without any interaction, you have potentially a successful solution, right? That you've communicated to all the parties involved. Video is great. Short, right? I use Snagit. I don't use anything fancy. Snagit videos for here, the supervisor. I want you to know this is what you should expect to do. Even here's what you do with that approval for Teams. Sometimes the smallest things, the 1-2-minute videos will help you, right? Document, use an intranet. If you have a team site where all these, the individuals are that are doing more elevated tasks, right, that are involved in it, you have separate documentation, private, just for the people in those roles. So the business problem we're going to solve with the solution you're going to look at is employee recognition, right? So employee recognition, there's so many different ways. I've done this so many different types of ways. A lot of it depends on the organization, the maturity, the process of the employee recognition, but very simple is, how do we do that? So let's go jump in, take a look. And I'm going to bring my browser up here. All right, any solution from an adoption, especially the higher up you go in terms of solving, to one audience like your executive leadership, data, the visualization of that data, of that process, becomes the only thing that they might need, that they go to. So whatever that visualization is for you, whether it is Power BI or whether it's an Excel dashboard or whatever, consider that adoption. Oh my goodness, I'm just trying to shut my phone off. That adoption for yours starts at whatever the top is, and you give them that data. Right? They're looking at this. Sometimes they're not involved in the day-to-day, but what they need to see, and this is a very basic dashboard. There's nothing fancy or sexy about it. But what you're also doing with all of those, that schema that you have, is allowing the interaction, you know, finance, this is a department. Like, oh, I introduced that early on. Now, no one has to ask for the department field. We know we can go get it out of your Azure AD. Hopefully, everyone now has clean Azures and, you know, clean ADs, and, you know, we could take advantage of that. But this is why we look to say, who are the audiences? What is it that they need to get out of most? And how are we going to use this data? Adoption, generally a dashboard of some sort, right? Now, I'm not going to get into too much, right? Even the dashboards, you can have multiple slices of the same dashboard. You've got the data set, and now I might have one that is for an executive and another, you know, they don't have to be in the same spot. You can publish dashboards pointing to the same data set. Now, in this solution, I have a team, and you know, I used a team just for considering like the members of the team. This is where I'm actually saving the data. So let's take a look at that. So this solution involves a form to collect information, and then involves a list with corresponding metadata, involves a Power Automate to process in-betweens and approvals. Right, so we'll take a look at this list first. This site, this employee recognition, is a team site, is part of a team site. So we think security as well. Right? Who should have access to this raw data? Who will be in this? Right? The team that's managing it. Does anyone need access to this? This is also how you can, you know, when you use tools like Power BI or use Excel or something, this is how you can also lift this data up, bring it to somebody else who may not have access directly to this site. Right? So things like that. So as you're looking through here, what I have is just different metadata. Now, if you have people interacting with your solution in here, using some conditional formatting, creating some different views is always good. You know, the goal too in solutions is to get people in and get them out. Do the job, make sure that they can see exactly what needs to happen. But by bringing this by manager, by this, by that, great. You can, there's an endless way that I can present this data back to people that are going to come to this list, right? But ultimately, simple conditional formatting on these columns. And as we step through this, now that I've got this list, let's go take a look at the form. The form is very simple. Right, this is where we started off with 8 questions. I use very much so a form that is depending on the sensitivity of information. If it is truly an anonymous form, you want to use anonymous, and you have to collect more data generally on the form than if you were to use like a form that is everyone in the company can access, right? There's just different things that you have to learn about what data you can glean out of on the backside. So simple. Now, you don't have to ask the same question to everybody. Right? So every one of these, you can have branching. If you haven't used forms, whether you use forms or, you know, a Power App to collect the data, that's up to you. If you can solve it with a form, do it. It's simple footprint. It's not huge. Right, but as I step through this, I can ask different questions for different choices. That's just branching. And the reason why I look at this, I do this, is because sometimes, right, I don't want to have a subcategory in here that has all these choices for the founders, the excellence, the outstanding, the all-star. So you want it to be relevant to whatever you're asking. Okay, great. It's all-star award, great. Teamsmanship, nothing crazy. And that's really it, right? If it's something like recognition, honestly, 4 questions at the most, sometimes, right? We want to promote the get in, get out, right? No one lives in SharePoint or Azure the way admins do or developers. They're not going to have it open all the time. So make the questions good, relevant, and don't ask them questions you can get answers to on your own. Don't ask them what their department is if you can get that on the back end, right? So know those types don't ask them for their phone number. Don't ask him for anything else. That if your Azure AD is good and you've got properties that are populated as part of your, maybe your onboarding process, use that. The more we can limit what we ask is the higher chance of people using this. All right. So here's this form. And now the first step in that form is it's going to write its record here. And then it kicks off. All right. So if we look at, there's different ways to develop forms, Power Automates. This is the part where you process. It's the workforce, the engine behind it all. Right. This is the old SharePoint designer on steroids. So you can have one flow and embed all of these. You can have multiple flows. When I would work for a customer, do some work for a customer, that I knew an admin that had no idea about all of this. Like if they were new, I break it out because I want them to be able to look at something and know that this is the step, right? This is the step that you need to go. It's just part of it just depends on who's going to manage it. Right? If I'm going to manage it, I know I'd embed it in one big form, one big Power Automate, but it's simple. This is the part 2. Remember that schema that we start introducing other things. So I asked 5 questions, and I know that I want to get as much out of, my user profile as possible. So I'm going to go get my profile from whoever responded, and I'm going to get my profile of whoever this nomination is about. So 2 sets of data. And then as I go through, I can now, right, sub-process these and say, all right, let me go look. I'm going to go all the way down here. I sent a Google email. And now from that one form, this is where I'm introducing, right, a combination of fields. The award type from the form. Okay, this is from the user profile. And some of these, they're automatic, right? This is the very first time, so it's open submitted. All right. So this is the part where I'm building my data setup. As we're stepping through the process, you can collect and begin to batch on more and more data. When you think about and this is just one process, right? There's all kinds of processes that you can automate, that you can change and use the same concept around. But the point is that things go through a life cycle. And you don't have to do everything all at once. You want to do them in small chunks. That is this successful, right? This one right here, great. Then we're going to keep moving on, and this goes back to that whole part of the flow. Mine is simple. I tried it. If there's multiple, my naming convention is generally, the department who owns this, and whatever the form is, and then a 1, 2, 3 or whatever it is. I try to have some standard in here so I can also, as I'm building more and more and more of these, there's a lot that I'm going to see. Now, here's a question that comes up about who runs this. I created this. Now, if it's a process, there's a couple things that are gonna help you determine whether or not you have a dedicated processing account, by department. Is how often and how much is going to be processed, who needs to access this, because I have a presence in 365 myself, right? So any activity that happens in here, I don't want it to oftentimes come from me as an individual, as a developer. I might create a group, or I might create a user, depends on your need, and say, all right, the communication for this process needs to come from HR, employee, whatever it is, HR processes, something as simple like that. And I can use that account for the next HR process and the next one. But all of the communication and the emails are going to come right from a different account. So consider too, who runs this. That doesn't mean I can't be part of it and I don't have access to edit it and modify it, but how we step through this and how, who actually is associated to this becomes important, right? Also becomes important as to how many times something is executing. Now, as we talked about, I'm stepping down through here, and each step I actually add on more data right? I add on more data in the following ones from the approvers. What did the approver say? What did they not say? The other thing to note is if your flows and your processes are new and they haven't run, I think it's 28 days. In 28 days, they're going to pause, right? The Power Automate's going to say, hey, we're going to suspend activity. That doesn't mean it goes away. Basically means that there's not a lot of activity, so it's not going to just keep it live. So you have to be aware of that because some business processes might be cyclical. Maybe it's once a year that they're going to get 300 requests that they need to do it. But ultimately, you have to consider, what happens the other part of the year when someone tries to run it and it doesn't, or someone tries to fill out the form and nothing happens. First step is always go back into your Power Automate, see if that activity has been suspended. Usually it's because of the 28-day window. Sometimes it's because of authentication, that the user that you had assigned to these steps, that user changed their password and you have to re-authenticate. So there's enough little things like that you want to consider. But, in here, as we step through this, every single time I'm adding, right, at that point, it went out, it created the first, let's see, first approval. Now, here comes the part, remember that flow that we had. Where am I going to communicate this data? Okay, so there's two places that people are going to approve from. One is their Outlook and the other one is Teams. It just depends on where your users have what's open the most for them, right? But the buttons are going to be the same. This part too about embedding, you have to be careful about what you embed. We don't want to embed sensitive data. But if we can communicate enough at this stage and avoid this person going to our website or to a place where I don't want them to go, right? Just to see the rest of the data, then that's a good thing. The goal is for someone to have what they need to act upon, approve, reject, comment, whatever it is. You can customize enough of these as well. You can also turn off things like reassign. Right, so there's things about the details of this approval that you'll want to consider. But I am of the belief that for approvers, especially business processes, that I will embed in here, not just what this request was, but I actually over time, right, will embed all the prior steps because I want that person to read this approval, see what they need to see, and either act upon it right then instead of stopping. They have to stop and say, oh, I don't really know about this. All right, so if I've given them the data at this step, they should be able to act upon it. If this looks great. And then there we go. The workflow is listening for this approval, for the change. It's listening, the Power Automate's listening for an approve or reject at this point in time. And then we're going to tell it what to do. Upon approve, it's going to go back here and it's going to do something. Let me see what it's going to do. I mean, I know what it's going to do. It'll eventually change this to be, oh, it's been, it's moving along, right, through the stages of the process. Let's go see. I'll just wait. There it goes. The next step, HR eligible. Great. Now, that kicked off a totally different Power Automate. But what I start to do in here is I begin to collect additional data. And there's just a ton of data on this one. Let's see. The HR recognition verified. Let me go look. Let me see. And I'm like, here, I'll just go back here. I'll open up this record. Probably the easiest way. So when I write back, once I listen for that approve, not approve, I can pull that data back in and we should see it somewhere in this awesome list. Yeah, here we go. HR verified it. I'm the person who did it. This is when I did it. I said they were eligible, right? And it's probably not done yet, but here's their comment. That's my schema now and my data building on top in each one of these processes. I'm just making sure I'm looking at my time. I think I've got 15 more minutes, right? all right. Okay, so this keeps going down and down and to the next step. And I'm going to go back in here and we're going to take a look at that approval again, that next one that should have kicked off. And maybe it didn't. I'm not sure. I'm not 100% sure. But the kind of the point in all of that is the list will stay. The data will change in this list with the process. As everyone interacts, and sure, I can now actually go, there's a couple of things I'll do. If I'm looking at the history of this, I can actually now, right, see that these were the things that occurred at each one of these stages. What I oftentimes do as well for anything that has any PII is I create a log outside of this list, and I write certain things, right? Vanessa approved. Second stage was approved by this person. I actually build it a completely different list at the tail end of my workflows because this data is great to have, but I want to see time sometimes. I want to see times between. I know that I want to show a nice little workflow in my diagram to say, yeah, you know, this business process actually took, we started off, right? Think about our KPIs, about our business process that we're replacing. It was 2 weeks most processes took, a process took, and we got it down to 1 week. You have to be able to have the data for you to say that you did that it's now taking only 1 week, right, to actually do this. So whether you build this data in here and you capture those points, date, right? This is the part about knowing how I want to visualize this, right, across time. That's how I know what data I want to collect. And I don't want to get to the point of building a dashboard for me, and I don't have all the data, and the process has been running for 2 months. Some of those records are already closed. And now here I am, and I'm like, oh, I really wanted this one field. If I had this one field and I could have introduced it in my workflow, I would have been able to have this view, right? So you have to think about that schema becomes really important and the life cycle of this. Now, communication, let's just go look at our email in here. I think I would have seen the same thing. I'm going to open up my, oh, you know what? Let me go look. Hold on. I have to open it up in my other email. Okay, 1 second. All right. Okay, hold on 1 second, guys. Just give me 1 second. All right, sorry about that. A rainy day at school, and the kids have to get picked up, so we're trying to coordinate all that. All right, I just want to make sure I came off mute. I want to make sure you guys can hear me.
Yep, got you, Vanessa.
Okay, perfect. All right, and I'm just looking for, because I had to send it out to my Gmail. The Gmail, Google. You know how painful it is to be a Microsoft person, have to deal with Google. Very painful. All right, so I guess the point being on this one is, right, that the communication will either be in Teams and it also goes into email. It looks a little different on the email side, but it's the same concept approved, right, that you have to do the same thing. So, so here we are. We've kind of talked about the solution, data visualization, where I'm saving this data in this list as part of a team, and the processes of the Power Automate as we're going through, right? So what questions can I answer so far about this? I've tried to leave as much time as possible for that. Nobody? No questions? Very surprised. All right, let me see if there's any in our chat.
No, I think you've wowed everyone there. Stun
You know,
site.
you can use this concept on so many things. So, you know, on onboarding and offboarding, whether it's people like, if you have systems, sometimes these systems don't always track every single thing that you might need. So you can extend maybe something that you're doing in, you know, ServiceNow or something that you're doing in Azure, right, to collect information. And even if it's for your internal auditing purposes, there's nothing wrong with that. Right? So the other thing I think to do, just want to remember, is as you build solutions, you want to always find out and ask if it's working or not, right? Is there something you can improve? The first period of time becomes very important. If you can improve with a 2-minute video, okay, great. If you can improve something by just asking the question differently or putting a description. You know, sometimes people like to me, that might seem pretty straightforward, but I'm telling you how many times I've done this where if you know, because it's not integrated on the form side, where you put nominee email and someone puts their own email. I'm like, you're the nominator. So, you know, there's a lot of things like that. You always want to check on the health of your solution. So.
How much can you do in terms of like the business process validation inside those forms? So you said the email example is a prime example there. Is if I wanted to assert in the form, don't put in the email that your own email.
Great. So
Is
there's
that-
two parts of that. Yeah, that's a good question. So if it's an email, if it's a form that you're asking of everybody, and it's an internal form, right? Let's go over here. Actually, yeah, right here. So anyone can respond. That's an anonymous. That means even external people, right? External people can respond. And it's not going to get email or anything else. Oh man. Okay, hold on one second. All right, sorry about that. So if only people in my organization can respond, this is where you get all of you can hook up into Power Automate and grab their profile, right? So how that works is, let me go back to the first one. It's pretty straightforward. So we know that the form response comes in, and then, right, so the form is submitted, I go and get the response details, and then I just go and use the user profile. I mean, there's a ton of these actions now. There's just so many of them, you can't even imagine. And I look for the user profile, and all I'm telling it is use the nominee email. Now, how do I get so at that point in time, when what you're looking at, right, what this opens up is your Azure AD properties. So that allows me then to go and fill in, you know, in my list, I'll have a bunch of fields like, let me make sure, I think it's in this one. Right, if I go in and look at the department, I'll go down here to the ads. Here we go. Here's all your profile stuff, right? The birthday, some of these aren't done by Azure, like birthday is not part of there, but some people have someone that have their users go in and put their month and day. But things like city, country, department, job title, certain ones are all in there that everyone has. Some of these come from the actual user profile themselves. So if I go here and I look at my profile, people have the ability to actually fill out, right, additional properties outside of like my department. So if I'm looking at like about me, projects, skills, right, schools and education, this is the extra stuff. So if you know that there's there's something between here and what you can get out of like the other stuff that comes in AD, department, job. So that's the part too, when you think about, I know I want to pivot. I want to pivot in here. number one by department, right? Wherever, yeah. So great, or by category or by department. Here, department. I also want to show that approval, show that data for that person, right? Nominee department, nominee job title, nominee location. This is where we extend, you're beginning to extend the data without having to ask. You know, granted, sometimes AD is driven by HR. So it's sometimes the larger the organization, the more HR uses AD properties to be closer to, like, let's say my job title when I was at a bank was systems engineer 2. That wasn't my real working title. Right? My real working title was a solutions architect. So you have to look too about what's in your AD and what makes it what's relevant. In order for you to know if, right, you have to bring this data, like if you can bring that data, because it might not be, they're like, oh yeah, solutions architect. If it's a real title, it's a real value in there, city, state, you know, those types of things. Yeah, you can bring those that data in.
And that
Did I answer your?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that goes back to your earlier comment about making sure your AD's in order.
Yeah, I mean, that's always been the case, whether it's on-prem or in 365. The more you have a clean AD, the better. And, you know, so what you can do initially is, if you guys aren't tied to, you know, in here, if you're not tied to HR basically filling this out, then you can expose some of the additional fields and turn them on so that users can update it. Like, yeah, they can add their home phone or their mobile phone, but they also could update their title or their office, right? It just depends on how strict you guys are. This too is where I've created a form for IT where it was a simple process. They gave everyone the same 5 fields. You know, what are these 5 things? They took that data and wrote a PowerShell script. We wrote a PowerShell script to update AD. So even then, you can use kind of the solution concept to, right, update even your own back end, right? So
yeah,
but yeah.
Then you've got to worry about validating data coming from users at that point.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
There's no doubt to that.
State. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's definitely, you know, it's definitely you don't have to, like, for me, I've done this solution so many times that I literally made this solution I don't know, a couple months ago, maybe last year, when I knew I was going to do this. So I've done this presentation because it's a great example of cross application. You know, how does it work? How do they all connect?
Yeah.
And how do you build that data set without having to someone stop and cut and paste and, you know, deal with this? It's like, I want as little as many touch points, you know, as few as touch points as possible. So.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Any more questions for anyone? It's gone very quiet.
I just love it when you see the back end. I think you called it, you know, the site configurator, the SharePoint site configurator on steroids. I mean, that Power Platform is just immense. The amount of stuff you can do, and you know, it makes me chuckle slightly when you hear this concept of citizen developer, and I think, really, okay, you can call people citizen developers, but you still got to be pretty savvy to do some of the cool stuff that you're doing there, Vanessa. So
oh yeah, you know, this has been around, the concepts of this, other than Power BI before it was reporting services, SSRS. You know, you didn't have teams that you really interacted with, but you know, it's interesting how the more apps that there are in this world, you get to, you're like, oh God, thank God there's a forms. That's much better than having someone do a list, you know, or customize something. You're like, you can't control this. You can't put conditions on there. So it just makes it, you find the easiest thing that that is, you know, works for the user. That's the part too. And you know, this stuff on the back end as it flows, and especially like the auditing, that's the part too when it comes in handy. I've done this where I didn't tell anybody I was writing a log. So the log itself are changes to this, right? This is the part too where you kind of have to think CYA. There's a log, and it's hidden from everybody. No one can see it. So you see changes. So I've had on some other sensitive type of audits where I knew exactly who changed it and why, and we were able to go look at the log or who deleted it. And so sometimes when you have admins that have people that, it's whether it's malicious and intentional and unintentional, doesn't really matter. The reality too is, as a developer, you do have to consider and CYA yourself, right? You're like, no, I didn't. That process works, and look, here's the trail. Your guy just did this thing.
Yep.
So it's a. But you find that this solution and this concept is something that you can solve. You can use the same model for IT, for HR, for marketing has business card requests. Easy.
Yep.
Marketing has like flyer request, or HR has, HR wants to make sure, and sometimes these solutions are for companies that, some solutions can grow up from here. What I mean by that is it becomes a dedicated, you're like, this is great, but it needs to do more. So they go and invest in another platform. There's nothing wrong with that, with your solutions growing up and the organization investing in a better platform. This allows all the parties involved to know what needs to be created, what is the process. It almost is a a pilot in a sense of that for a production type of system. So yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
No, well, look, Vanessa, I mean, just to touch on Alan's comment there in the chat, and that's always a really good question. I think the whole kind of conversation around Power Automate versus Logic Apps in Azure is quite an interesting one. And I've seen this. I don't know if you've got any views on it, Vanessa, with the fact that it's effectively the same thing, but just badged up differently. I think that's the answer, to be honest, Alan. I think maybe one is maybe more centered towards that citizen developer in the Power Platform, and Logic Apps in Azure maybe is used to kind of automate other things that maybe pro devs / citizens devs. So yeah, but I think it's essentially it's the same thing, right?
It's also the integrations that are being developed for them. So right on the Azure side, you find that on the Power Automate side, there's so many little plugins. But when you're talking about the big data integration, right, that's where you've got an IBM or whoever making, better integration applications. And remember, this is Microsoft. So Microsoft does everything with the intention of always upselling. So yeah, I'm going to give you a tool for the Azure side, kind of like Power Automate, but on steroids, but it's going to cost you more money, so, that's the nature, right? That's the nature. I think everyone should have an E5. That's what I think. I'm like,
and I think you'll find Microsoft sellers agree.
Yes, they would agree. They should get rid of that E3 altogether and just make everyone have E5 and just have a better price, a little bit better price.
Alan, lower the price, Alan. Alan's lobbying already. Okay. Take the feedback. But no, Vanessa, thank you so much. What an awesome run through. And I think, to be honest, I think that was a really kind of great blend to kind of show us infra / dev techies on the Azure side, that little exposure to 365 and the kind of the capabilities. So no, look, honestly, really, thank you so much for giving up your time, Vanessa. Yeah, if everyone wants to do the virtual emoticon thing, we'll come off me.
All right, thank you guys.
Feel free to stick around, but if you've got kids to sort, understood.
I've got to go get them.
All right, we'll let you get on. But thanks a lot,
Bye,
Vanessa.
guys. Thank you.
Take care. See you soon.
Cheers, Vanessa.
And as we say that, as Mr. Fatunka gets ready for the quiz, Dean has joined us for some licensing questions. You're always going to get it, Dean.
I did restrain myself to not ask a licensing question. So
I'm surprised, actually. I'm surprised.
Yeah.
Alan beat you to it.
yeah.
Right,
But,
let's try this again, shall we?
get on with the quiz.
Right. Hopefully, have you got the alternative thing ready in case we need it, John?
No, I got full faith in you, Matt. Why would I need any alternative thing?
Good. Let's give this a go then, shall we? Good luck, everyone. I will say, do you realise how hard it is trying to write a quiz a week before build when all the announcements get done, and there is zero Microsoft news coming out?
Well, you could just make it up then, can't you? Just make
Well,
up your own
As you'll
answers as
see
well.
now, this is what you'll end up saying.
So what are we doing tonight? How many we got in the chat still? 15, 16?
I think we might be on for one, maybe even two at a push, given we've got some new sponsors.
Yeah. And this is going to be interesting if guys from Credit Safe win.
I don't think there's much chance of that, to be honest. But there you go.
Oh, I don't know. Don't do yourself down now. I mean, well, actually saying that, Matt come up with these questions, so I think it's a bit random who's going to win.
They are quite random questions this time.
We stand a chance. Then.
The validation.
No worries, Han. Thanks for joining us, Han.
Yeah, thanks, Sam.
See you at the next one, hopefully. Oh, we've got somebody with no name. Who's the starry-eyed person with no name?
Yeah, I'm adding that to the backlog. There's another thing to add.
Yeah, to those new joiners, this platform was completely designed and built by Mr. Verdunker.
Not no name. I reckon that's me because it appeared just after I typed it in. But
So
it's a
who was the
long
last
name.
one
It was
to
the
join?
limit. It was the
So
limit.
you're trying to break my system, is that what you're saying?
Yeah, but
Did
just
you put your full
stress
middle
testing.
name? And
Fair enough.
did you really put like a 128 character name in there?
No. It was only 16. Dean, LOE, MC, MVP, and MCT.
And yeah, all around
we'll find
community
out.
celebrity.
Yeah.
For those that come on a regular basis, this is spectacularly failed for the last.
Well,
two
look,
sessions.
Alan's just kind of jumping to it. He's saying spin the wheel.
Yep. Thanks, Alan. Right, is anyone
Well, we got
struggling?
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. There's 10 of us in there. Anybody struggling to get in? Speak now or forever hold your peace.
1 second, John. My whole team's just crashed.
Oh, it's Alan again. Matt, it's
I
Alan.
know. I'm having a nightmare.
You too. All right, we'll hang on. You were doing well last time when it crashed, weren't you, Alan?
I was, yes. I was like, oh, no, some of these for a change. Right, I should be.
There he is. He's in. Al, you're in. Or is that
Okay.
AI? And it's a sentient AI.
No, it's my AI bot that's doing the quiz.
Are we good,
ready?
everyone? I think we're good. Come on, let's go for it.
I'll hit the button.
Right.
Topical one. When does Microsoft Build start? Who was paying attention at the start?
Have we got that date right? Or did I get it wrong?
I think there's like a pre-day. So technically, the main conference starts, I think, on that day. I almost gave it away then. Yes, the 23rd.
Next week.
On that day, yes. Okay, which regulator blocked Microsoft's acquisition of Activision Blizzard?
Ooh.
Going on mute before I blurt an answer.
It was the Competition and Markets Authority, the CMA. What's the name of the new access tier in preview for Azure Storage?
Oh, that's a tricky one.
Who's been paying attention this week?
I'm going to say literally that only came out like a couple of days ago, Matt. Come on.
It's X, isn't it?
Damn it. I got the wrong one.
Old. Which version of Windows was launched in May 1990? Should be a relatively easy one to predict. It was B, 3.0. Well done. Which MS site had a relaunch this month to promote a movie?
Oh.
And it's an excellent movie too if you haven't seen it yet. No spoilers. It was Zoom.net to promote Guardians of the Galaxy.
Really?
Oh.
The Zune features fairly prominently inside the Guardians of the Galaxy movie.
Well, there's also a load of clippy stuff floating around at the minute, if you have a look see as well.
Load of stuff about ChatGPT. What does LLM stand for?
Yes.
I think the green one, is that just a lifestyle choice you've chosen there, Matt?
That one.
Yeah.
No, that's live long and prosper, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Close enough.
Live long.
At what time on the 23rd of April was the UK's emergency alert system supposed to sound? Unless you were on 3.
I had mine a minute early.
Did you not turn the emergency alerts off in your phone settings?
I have now.
Don't think so. There you go. It was 3 p.m. Oh, complicated one now. What's the maximum memory the new EBSV5 NVMe virtual machines can be allocated?
Oh, they're E series, so that's going to be quite high because they run SAP for HANA, right?
Yep. It's
Oh, it's sad.
672 gigabytes. Well done. Random amount.
Yeah, who thought that number up?
What domain are M365 apps moving to?
Yes.
So the web-based versions of all the M365 are getting new URLs. It's cloud.microsoft. So I think teams.cloud.microsoft is the one that I've seen doing the rounds.
Yeah, and then they're going to rebrand it in a couple of weeks.
Mm-hmm. Premium Pro Enterprise Edition 2000.
He
Which
knows
of the
about that.
following is not an M365 app? I think this is the last one.
Oh. Is that a trick question
Come
there,
on,
mate?
John, you should know this one.
This is definitely a trick question.
Yeah, it's a trick question, isn't it? Well, I'm reading into it too much.
Correct answer there was lean. Sway definitely is.
Oh, God. Yeah, I was thinking Yammer because of Eva Engage.
Well, technically, yes, you're
See,
right.
it's there we go. So I got it right, but I got it wrong.
Called
Thank
that
you.
anymore. So our winner is a no-name person. Brilliant. Is that you? So we had 2 no-name people on.
That would be Dean LBM VP MCT. Yeah.
Was there no other? I think that's true enough. I'm happy to take that because there was
Share
no
my
other
screen
no-name
if you
people.
like.
Look at Dean. Look, getting all.
Is it showing on your screen? Is it, Dean?
Yeah, 5600.
Okay, there we go.
Well, there we go then. So what are we doing? 1 or 2 prizes?
Oh, Al finally won one. Well done.
Oh, Al, you got in there. Look, this is making up for the last couple of months.
Yeah, and I misclicked twice as well.
Oh.
And it worked. Yeah.
I do have a technical question on it. Are you
Go on then.
better off doing it? So if you do it, so I fired up my web browser on the machine to minimize the risks of issues.
Yeah.
But all you get to see is the colored buttons. You don't get to see the questions as well. Is that?
Yeah, it's on the backlog.
Okay.
For adding questions. In fact, you can go and see it, and I can put the GitHub link in. If anyone wants to contribute to it and add to it, you're more than welcome to. It's
If
absolutely
you've written it in PowerShell, I'll help.
Unfortunately, no. Or if you go back to about a year ago, there is the full talk on the creation of it that I did.
There is. It's in that link in the playlist. It's well worth a watch because it's really good. I think I've been what was it like? Your hype man with this, Matt, for the last year or so, haven't I?
Yeah. You're doing a much better job of promoting this than I am, because I'm
just giving you more work. Everybody's adding issues to.
I don't
to
want
the
more people
backlog.
using it, because then I have to support it.
Does it factor in time to the answers?
Yes.
Yeah,
So the faster you answer, the better. Yeah. It's the
See the
same
little
as
clock.
food.
Clock counts down in the corner, doesn't it, when you're answering? If you look on the main screen. All right, should we bring this one to a?
I think that's a good call. So
To a conclusion.
congratulations to both Dean and Anne.
Yes, Dean and Al, just do me a favour and drop me a Twitter or a LinkedIn message so I remember to get your emails together and get the vouchers off to you, if you don't mind. Okay, cool. Right, we'll bring it to a close then. So yeah, you can see my screen, I'm assuming. So thank you everybody for joining. More importantly, I say more importantly, there's no more importantly. I mean, as important are the speakers, Ben and Vanessa. Two awesome talks tonight. Thank you so much, guys, for giving up your time. Ben, loved it.
You're welcome.
And I know that Vanessa's left us for the evening, but
Quickly, Ben, just before you shoot. So, how did you want people to enter your competition?
Do you know what? I'll just make it really easy. Just put some comment on LinkedIn and tag me.
Sure.
Done. And
Amazing.
then I will take everybody on Monday, the 22nd. I think I've got it at 10 o'clock in my diary. I'll take everybody that I can find that was mentioning the warg and tagging me, and I will do a PowerShell script to randomly call somebody out. You'll have to trust me. I'll send you the code if you really want.
Perfect.
and a
Thank
video
you
of you
so
doing
much.
it.
Yeah, the video. Yeah.
No, it's great. I think it worked really well as well. I think, having these kinds of chats as well, where it's looking at the I mean, it's not necessarily soft skills, is it? I guess it's looking at the techniques that we should all probably be focusing on a bit more is probably the reality. So yeah, really enjoyed the sessions tonight. So thanks again, Ben. And we'll catch up at some point, no doubt. So thank you to those guys. And just a quick save the date. 21st of June. Yeah, I think I'm just looking at my calendar. Yes, 21st of June is the date for our next event. It will be virtual again. I know we keep promising to do the whole hybrid thing, but like we said at the start of the show, I think Richard's gonna kind of get the cane out with me and Matt now and kind of hit us into shape to get a. No, I don't know where I'm going with that. Give us some feedback. There's a QR code. Scan that. Everybody loves a QR code. Drop us some feedback, and if you want to speak, please do let us know. Like I say, it's a safe space for everybody. Hopefully you'll find we're nice, warm and comforting. I just got to stop with these things that I'm saying at the minute. It's late. I'm going to go home and have some food and see the kids. But thank you all. Been a pleasure. Thanks everybody for joining. Hopefully we'll see you all next month. Have a nice rest of the evening, everybody.
Yeah, thank you so much for organising. Thank you.
Thanks, all.
Yeah, thank you.
All right.
Cheers, guys.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks,
Bye.
everyone. Bye.
Thanks everyone. Ta-da, bye. Cool. All done. Here we are.
Stop the recording.
That'd be a good idea, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
Bye everybody on the recording.
Bonus